going on, guys? Junior's Fishing Company with a Marabou Ned Rig today. This is a 3/16 ounce. It used to be black. This is just a Z-Man. It's got a little couple metal weed guards in there. I fish a lot of lakes that have a lot of weeds, and I have just found you might lose a bite because they see the weed guards if it's super pressured. I don't know, but I would rather have that than every time I cast I'm pulling up weeds with my hook. Again, this used to be black. I painted it with just do it mold paint. This is pumpkin brown, and I mean, a jar like this, I mean, this is a 1 ounce jar. These are like, I don't know, between $8 and $10, but I could paint 100 of these jigs. So this is a nice little investment if you really like to, a lake that you fish has a certain color that you don't see at a store, you gotta start buying paint, and all you do is dip it in there and you're good to go. Let it dry, and then I'll dip it a couple times in water-based head cement just for durability and stuff. I don't fish a ton of rocks, so I don't really need it, but teeth too. The color combo on this is brown and like an amber. I really don't know what color this is because I've had this Marabou forever, and when I first started tying, I would just take stuff out of the bag, and I've learned my lesson. Now, whenever I buy materials, I'll take a picture, and in my phone, I've got a file that's just lure stuff, and I can look back, and if I have a bag like this, I can see what color it was. I don't know what color it is. And then this is just brown, so it's like an amber and a brown. The flash that I used just a little bit. I think I used like 6 or 7 strands, maybe 8, of holographic flashabou in bronze, just to add just a little bit. I put it right at the first wrap, just to bring it down to about the end of the fibers, and I put a couple in at the very end. If you put it in the middle, it's just going to get matted down anyway. You're not going to be able to see it. So I put it at the beginning and then at the very end. I wanted this bait to be pretty short, and when this bait gets wet, I think the longest it'll get, I don't even think it'll get to 4 inches. I think it'll be closer to 3.5 than it will be to 4, just because this is a finesse presentation. I'm fishing it deep, I'm fishing it slow. I don't need some giant bulky bait. I know it looks bulky now because of the Marabou, but this thing is going to be for sure thinner than this head. And I think I've mentioned that in a video, maybe a video or 2 ago or something like that. A lot of these small jigs that I tie, I want the head to be the widest part. So brown and amber Marabou jig, it's tied up. So I've got my Marabou ready to go. There's really just kind of 2 things I wanted to talk about before I get wrapping, and that is which color I'm laying down. So with this first one, I'm going to have my lighter color on top, so when I'm wrapping this is going to be on top, and then the other ones, I'm going to have my darker one. Really, the only reason I'm doing this bottom one, I think it might show a little bit more in this back, because if I laid it the opposite way, this darker brown would sit on top, and with these longer feathers or fibers, I think a little bit more of that amber is going to show up in that tail. So I'm going to be intentional about this first wrap. It really doesn't matter. I mean, if you're doing an all white or a black and white even, it probably doesn't matter too much. I'm just thinking it'll matter a little bit because I want this tail, the tail of this, just to be a little bit lighter. And then the second thing is when I was picking through this Marabou, I was really deliberate. I wanted the longest fibers that I could find, especially again in this first one. This is going to be the longest fibers that I could find in this amber, and they're going to be longer than the brown too, even though the browns I picked out to be long. But I wanted really long fibers, so if you're going to do a jig like this and do it in a way that I'm kind of doing it. I'm just thinking about stuff like that because I want this bait to have a certain look to it, and I think that's just going to help get me there. So I've got my thread on. This is just 210. You could probably do 70 denier. This is just 210 because all my 70 denier is with my winter stuff, and I really don't have a lot of 140. I really just do, it's either 210 or 70. 140 is good every now and then, but if you're pretty gentle with 70, you can do a lot with 70. So I'm gonna grab this. It's brown. It's just brown 210 UTC. I just don't want this bait to be too long. This bait might be 4 inches when it's all said and done, so I just don't want to go too far back into that bend. It's gonna be a really thin, I'm only using 2 feathers per wrap. I might have 6 feathers on here, maybe 7. We'll see how far up I get with these first 6 feathers. We'll see how far it goes, but if anything, I'll kind of just space them out a little bit farther because I just don't want a super thick bait. And marabou, it's really hard to make too big of a bait, or it mats down so much where you need a lot of marabou to have a body. So I'm just gonna make sure that those are in my hackle pliers, and I got a little bit of water here. I don't want to put too much because I just don't want it to lay down too much, because when you guys are looking at it, I don't want it to look like some jumbled mess. Maybe I'll just work a little farther up and I can always come back. So I'm just going to wrap this. I want to avoid my feathers getting too caught. I'll just wrap. I'm not going to fast forward through this or anything, just because I think this is going to be a pretty quick video. And you can see kind of what I'm doing. Not that I'm some marabou expert, but I feel like marabou jigs have gotten really popular. I mean, there's a million of them out there that you can buy, but it's a lot more fun to make them, and you can make any color that you want. I swear most of the marabou I see being sold is just black, but sometimes it's nice to have other colors as well. So I'm just going to keep wrapping this. Right now it's just a little tricky. I got to watch out for my hook because this is a sharp hook, and this is a thin stem, and I don't want to slice my little delicate marabou stem on that sharp hook point. I mean, it would just take you a little bit. You just got to grab new feathers. But these colors of feathers, I didn't have a ton. I mean, it's brown. I mean, it's a pretty common color to use, but I can just order more. But I chose these feathers because they're really long fibers. Not necessarily for their puffiness, or sometimes you'll see a feather and it's really puffy. I gotta bend that stem. Sometimes you'll see feathers and they're really thin and just pointy. I don't have one to show you, but if you've used marabou, one marabou feather could be a lot different. I'm gonna try and get one more out of this, and I can just come back. These are thick stems. This isn't blood quill, but it almost seems like it because these stems are so thick. I don't know if I've really made many videos with blood quill. They have their place, but I usually strip if I'm using blood quill, I'll just strip the fibers off. And I'm going to latch that down really well. And I'm going to put just a little bit of flash right here. The flash is going to get buried pretty good by my next wrap. Lost a couple fibers. It's going to get buried a little bit, but I'm going to put it so it goes to about the tip. I'm just going to put a couple. And I've got this little, this is literally a lash and brow wand. I bought it at Target, and it works really well when you're combing out marabou. I don't like to comb it with like a, traditional comb, because you can break fibers. But this is almost like a, I don't know, like almost like a Velcro-y material. And it just works really well when you want to brush out marabou, because it's pretty delicate. So the flash I'm going to use is holographic flashabou bronze. But the bronze is kind of like a dark copper. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a couple in there that go to about the back of my marabou. Just a couple. I mean, literally I have 3 strands of flashabou. And I'm just going to separate them by hand, because again, there's only 3. And then I'll fold back the other 3 on the opposite side. Just get those wrapped up right on top. And I can separate these ones on my hook. And then I'll just trim them off. Normally, like you've seen in a ton of my other videos, I'll cut and then push back. But I have 3 strands here. So it's not like I'm gonna spend 20 minutes trimming that tinsel. There's 1, there's 2, and here's 3. Just to about the back of that marabou. Just so it adds a little bit of flash to that tail. I'll put more in on my next one. So I've got my next stack. Now again, the brown is going to go on top. So that's what I'm going to lay first. And I can get them tied on. And honestly, if I were really wanting to make this a small, thin little marabou jig, I might just use these last 2 and call it good, and just kind of do really wide wraps. But I think I might add another one. These stems are so long, I don't even think I'll need my hackle pliers. So I'm going to get this folded back. That first one wasn't folding very well, so I'm going to add a little bit more water to these, just so they listen a little bit better. You always want your bodkin ready to go when you're wrapping like this, because you want to make sure that you get as little trapped under each wrap as you can. There's always a few that get trapped in there, and so you just use your bodkin as you're going, and you can just pick out as you go, because if it wraps on itself, then it's doing no one any good. So honestly, I think I'm just going to do 2. I'll even be able to do pretty tight wraps here. I really like how this color's looking though. I think it looks really good. So I won't have a ton of flash on here, because maybe I'll add a couple at the end. This is a really nice color. I'm a Minnesotan. This is reminding me of the Golden Gophers. So maybe if you're a Gopher fan, drop a comment below. Maybe you're from Wisconsin though. Sorry to hear that. So I got a bunch that are just trapped in there. You can maybe even see it on the camera when I'm picking them out. And I'm going to go up as far as I can. Watch out for that hook. These hooks are really sharp. So I'll get this wrapped all the way around. And I'm not worried. These are really thick stems. So my collar is going to be a little bit bigger, but honestly, if that is your biggest concern, then you're probably doing something right anyway. I'm going to pull really hard and kind of thin those out a little bit. Then I'll just wrap one really tight wrap. You can see how hard I'm pulling on that. I don't want to get all tangled up in my marabou or in my weed guard. Do not want to do a bunch of wraps between my weed guard. So I'm going to go behind it 4 or 5 times. I don't know, I'm not going to count. And then I can just cut this off as down there as I can. Then I'll just mash this down. I can just try and mash down. This is where you want 210 and not 70. Oh. Don't hit your weed guard. I just said that, and then I hit my weed guard. Quarter my thread. So I'm just going to cover all of this stem. I don't want that white sticking out. That's just for me, that's not for the fish. The fish don't care if there's a little white dot. So I've got this tinsel sitting in front of me anyway. I'm just gonna add just maybe, this is 2 strands. Again, this isn't gonna be some super flashy bait, and I don't want it to be, but I want just a little bit. Because when that thing's just sitting on the bottom, if there's a little bit of light that's getting down, however deep you're fishing or whatever water clarity you're fishing in, but just a little bit of flash in there, just because, this isn't mimicking a bluegill, obviously, but a lot of those things that live in the water have some flash to them. Then I can just do a couple half hitches, and I'll put some head cement down. Maybe just 3. I usually do 3, sometimes 4. You can always just put a little super glue on the end of your thread too and wrap that. So I'm going to let this dry a little bit just so we can kind of see how this marabou is going to look dry. And then wet is wet. This thing's going to mat down pretty good. But these marabou jigs, if you're using an all black marabou jig, I think leech. What else are you going to fish it with? What are the fish going to think it is? So I'm just going to comb this out, kind of like you would a dubbing loop almost. And with this light brush, you can see I can just go over it a bunch, and I'm not going to break any of these fibers. I just want to break them out. Alright, so there you have it. Simple 4 marabou feathers, I don't know, maybe 8 strands of flashabou, some thread, and a jig head, and you're good to go. Little brown, I really, really like, I don't know how it's going to look in the camera, but I really like this color combination. 3/16 ounce Ned head, marabou jig. It's summer, fish are tough, fishing deep, fishing slow, light line, light rod. This is what I'm going to be throwing this weekend. Like and subscribe, drop a comment below, check out the homepage. Appreciate all the support. Junior's Fishing Company. We'll see you on the next one.